unlike no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. The Chancellor's multi-billion-pound budget gamble. Rachel Reeves sets out plans that will take the tax burden to the highest level in modern history, laying the blame with the last government.
Their failure to assess the scale of the challenges facing our public services means that this budget raises taxes by £40 billion.
Most of the things announced are nowhere to be found in this document. And so it raises the question about whether they really have a mandate for all of this tens of billions in new tax and spend.
The small beer for businesses and a warning about pay, jobs and growth after a national insurance hike that raises £24 billion. But the Chancellor turns her financial firepower onto helping working people and public services with a big rise in the minimum wage and billions more for the NHS.
I'm here in Valencia in Spain, where 3 days of national mourning have been declared after devastating flash floods. At least 95 people have been killed across the country as villages are inundated and major road and rail lines are closed.
And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello, good evening. Today's budget, the first delivered by a female Chancellor, was always going to be historic. But it soon became clear that this was a budget on a scale without recent precedent and with the ambition of reshaping the political and economic terrain of this country. By the time Rachel Reeves sat down after speaking for over an hour, we had learned several big facts about this Labour-run economy. Taxes up by billions to the highest level in modern history. Borrowing up by billions. Investment too, however, up by billions with the focus on money for the NHS. All necessary, the Chancellor argued, to deliver national renewal. The outgoing Tory leader, Rishi Sunak, with a different verdict, calling it the broken promise budget. Well, let's take a look then at some of the main measures. The amount of national insurance paid by employers will increase to 15% from April 2025, and the threshold employers start paying will be reduced from £9,100 per year to £5,000. There will be an increase in capital gains tax, with the lower rate increasing to 18% from 10%, and the higher rate increasing from 20% to 24%. There will be an increase in the stamp duty land tax surcharge on second homes to 5%. There were announcements about spending too for the NHS, a £22.6 billion increase in the day-to-day health budget, plus a £2.3 billion boost for the schools budget. The national minimum wage is going up by 6.7% to £12.21 an hour, which is worth up to £1,400 a year for a full-time worker. And in good news for drivers, it was announced that fuel duty will be frozen next year. With our first report tonight, here's our political editor, Beth Rigby.
We've been waiting for this since the general election, the fiscal flesh on the bones of Labour's promise of change. The first Labour budget in nearly 15 years, a defining moment for Britain, delivered by the first female Chancellor.
The Chancellor of the Exchequer.
The scale and scope of Labour's plans are breathtaking. Reeves billing this her new settlement for Britain.
The only way to drive economic growth is to invest, invest, invest. We must restore economic stability and turn the page on the last 14 years.
But rebuilding comes at a cost. This, the biggest tax-raising budget in decades.
Together, the hole in our public finances this year, which recurs every year, the compensation schemes that they did not fund, and their failure to assess the scale of the challenges facing our public services means that this budget raises taxes by £40 billion.
Paid for by businesses and the wealthy. Employers' national insurance levies, inheritance tax and capital gains tax all going up. Labour lifting Britain's tax burden to its highest level in history, whilst also promising to protect working people's pay packets.
We are asking businesses to contribute more, and I know that there will be impacts of this measure felt beyond businesses too, as the OBR have set out today. But in the circumstances that I have inherited, it is the right choice to make.
And the scale of new spending seismic too, along with new rules on borrowing to fund it. Defence spending up, although still shy of the 2.5% target. £5 billion more on housing and a massive £25 billion boost for the NHS over the next 2 years.
I commend this statement to the House.
A huge budget and a huge moment, not just for her, but for him too. But the opposition not smiling at all.
The leader of the opposition.
What does today's budget do? It raises tax on working people by increasing national insurance and breaking Labour's promise. As the Independent Institute of Fiscal Studies have said, this is a straightforward breach of their manifesto.
4 months on from the election, Rachel Reeves finally showing her hand and defending her choices. £40 billion of taxes. It's the biggest tax-raising budget since 1993. It's gigantic. And you said before the election no plans to raise taxes, or the PM did, beyond the £8 billion that you had earmarked. So a lot of people out there are going to be quite shocked today.
I accept that this is a big and a substantial budget.
But
it wasn't the
people
budget
might feel
that
let
I
down,
was.
that
It wasn't
you
the
weren't
budget.
straight with them.
It wasn't the budget that I was expecting to deliver when I became Chancellor on the 5th of July. I didn't think that any government would be so reckless to have £22 billion of unfunded commitments.
Are you honestly saying that you have a democratic mandate for the measures that you have announced today? Tens of billions of pounds in increased spending and tens of billions of pounds of tax rises, none of which is in this document. You have a democratic mandate for this.
The first line of the first step in our manifesto was to return stability to our economy. That is the most important thing that I had to do as Chancellor. And we do have a mandate for bringing that stability back to the economy.
You're asking the public for 40 billion tax rises. Can you at least reassure people there are no more tax rises after this?
Well, I've committed to just have one budget a year. I'm not coming back to this in the spring.
Parliament.
No, I'm not going to make commitments to never change taxes again. That would be irresponsible. But this is a once-in-a-Parliament budget to wipe the slate clean after the mess that the Conservatives have left us.
Change. It's on the cover of Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer's manifesto, and today we finally got to understand what that really means. The tax and spending decisions announced in this budget are as historic and hefty as this manifesto was fiscally vague. Most of the things announced are nowhere to be found in this document. And so it raises the question about whether they really have a mandate for all of this tens of billions in new tax and spend. Labour has spent months blaming the Tories for the choices Rachel Reeves now makes. But this is not about the Conservatives anymore. It's about her unprecedented plan to rebuild Britain and whether voters will go along with it or feel misled.
Well, Beth joins me live now from Downing Street. So tax, spend, borrowing, big decisions taken today, Beth. Short-term pain, the government argues, rewarded with long-term gain economically and politically, they hope. But will it, as you posed there, wash with voters?
Look, Anna, the first thing to say is that this budget is a massive departure from the manifesto. It is a budget that will define the political battle lines for the rest of this Parliament and perhaps define our country for the next decade. The biggest tax increases seen since 1993 and huge levels of borrowing to fund £100 billion of capital investment. Does the government have a mandate for this? It's fair to say it was not in the manifesto. You saw Rachel Reeves explain her reasons why, but this was not laid out before the general election, so there might be many voters out there who feel let down. It is a massive gamble, and it is businesses and the wealthier that are taking the hit. What is the calculation by Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves tonight? Well, I think what they are gambling is that by protecting the pay packet of workers, of their core voters, while also front-loading some of these spending commitments for the first couple of years of this Parliament, that they will be able to show the electorate that in the second half of this Parliament that public services are improving under a Labour government, that they did deliver, and that will be the gamble, and they will hope that they will be rewarded for that at the ballot box. But there is huge risk in this. For a start, it looks like growth declines towards the back end of this Parliament. Rachel Reeves won't say if she's going to raise taxes again, and some of those tax rises on businesses tonight, there's suggestions that that might depress or limit business investment, which she so desperately needs. It's a massive roll of the die. It's a massive gamble, but at last, after months of this Labour government being in power, we finally know what they stand for and what they intend to do.
Beth, live in Downing Street, thank you. Well, as we've been hearing, this was a day of big numbers. £40 billion in tax rises, £28 billion in more borrowing and £19 billion in extra public investment. So what's the bottom line then for the future of growth and the wider economy? Here's our data and economics editor, Ed Conway.
This was a big budget, far bigger than expected, and a massive change in terms of taxation and in terms of spending. This is showing you, going back to the 1970s, just how much each different fiscal event, so budgets and autumn statements, have raised taxes or indeed cut them. Look where the bars are. And look at this time around, OK? So this particular budget raised taxes an awful lot. In fact, by the biggest amount that we have seen going all the way back to 1993. That was Norman Lamont post-Black Wednesday. Well, this, in terms of raising taxes, is actually not that far away from that. And of course, we're talking about higher national insurance, we're talking about higher inheritance tax, we're talking about higher capital gains tax. But add it all up, and you're talking about the burden of overall taxation here rising considerably. It was expected to rise. So this is Jeremy Hunt's plans back in March. The tax burden was going to go up. But when the Labour Party gave their manifesto, they said, yeah, we're going to raise taxes a wee bit higher than that. But what we just heard about today was not just a wee bit higher, it was massively higher. That is a significant jump in terms of UK taxation, taking the total tax burden, this is your incidence, just how much we're all paying in terms of all taxes, to the highest rate that we've ever seen on record. Now, it's worth just saying the UK, when it comes to comparing us with other countries, we are more or less mid-table when it comes to just how heavily taxed we are. That's the UK, that red bar there. And you can see other countries like Iceland, Japan and the rest are kind of around the same level. What does this do? It takes us up a little bit. So we go up from being kind of mid-table to slightly higher mid-table as a result of this, but still below some Scandinavian countries or Germany, but way above, for instance, Ireland and the United States. But all of that being said, the reason for this higher taxation is in part for the government to spend more, in particular spend money on investment. So the previous government, their plan was to cut investment in the coming years. Look at where Rachel Reeves is planning to push investment. Higher investment in the near term, and then still considerably higher investment than the Conservative plans looking out into the future. But here's the concern. There's actually two concerns for the Chancellor. First of all, it's not really turning into quite as much growth as she might have liked. This is the growth forecast from the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, last time around. So growth going up, and economic growth is really kind of what matters. And you invest more in order to generate more growth so we have money in our pockets. And bear in mind, this government says it wants to have the highest growth rate in the G7. That was last time around. Look at this time, OK? So the bars come up. They're a little bit higher in the first 2 years, but look at 2026, 27 and so on. Downgraded, 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 and weaker growth off into the future than expected. That goal of trying to get the highest growth in the G7, that looks very unlikely indeed. The other thing I think that will concern the Chancellor is this, the market reaction. Now, we look at government bond rates. It's how much people charge the UK to lend money to them, essentially. Remember, after the Truss budget, they went up through the roof. This time around, OK, so there's a 10-year government bond rate. They stayed relatively low during the speech. But once those documents were published and people started to look at the numbers, in particular all that borrowing, just look at that line. It went up. Not enough, perhaps, to show anything like panic, but definitely a considerable level of disquiet about all that extra borrowing that's coming from the Chancellor.
Ed Conway. Well, the government started its time in office with the discovery of what it called a black hole in the public finances. And today we found out that it's business that has been singled out to foot a large portion of the bill, including, but certainly not limited to, the widely trailed hike in employers' national insurance. Our business and economics correspondent Paul Kelso reports now from Bristol.
A bird's-eye view of the budget as seen by the businesses of Bristol. The capital of the west of England is the strongest economic performer of the UK's large cities beyond London. But this budget may weigh down even established high flyers like Cameron Balloons.
I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Founder Don has seen 17 chancellors since opening the doors in 1971. By increasing national insurance at a stroke, Rachel Reeves has made the battle with European competitors harder to win.
We're dealing with people who pay about half what we do, and with a much lower tax rate, lower cost of living. so it's difficult to compete with. But when we do the payroll at the end of the month, about 40% is going to the government.
The national insurance hike will raise £25 billion, but with business rates and the minimum wage going up, a penny off a pint in alcohol duty won't touch the sides here.
Since 2020, really, everything's been squeezed so tight. We're making like half the profit that we were making back then, and now we're looking at more costs added to that, business rates more than doubling. There's going to be no room for any mistakes, basically, no room for growth, no room to be able to look to the future. I think that's what's one of the most difficult things for us.
Rachel Reeves is asking businesses to do the heavy lifting of repairing the public finances, but they won't do it alone. Even the Office for Budget Responsibility, that's the Treasury's watchdog, says that employees, the working people Labour say they want to protect, will pay a price, perhaps in lower pay rises or fewer jobs. The aim is that improved public services will help deliver growth, but public spending will remain tight. That could mean less for local authority-funded venues like the Watershed on Bristol Harbour.
We're supporting over 500 creatives, and what we hear from them is that their income has gone down over £12,000 each in the last year. Normally, we would be concentrating on that, really thinking about how we could help them, but actually this year we've got to concentrate on getting our oxygen mask on ourselves.
After tax and spend, borrowing to fund the biggest public investment programme since the 1960s is the third leg of this budget. But with business investment also forecast to decline thanks to the tax squeeze, the Chancellor's big bet on economic liftoff carries the risk of a mighty fall. Paul Kelso, Sky News in Bristol.
Well, at the heart of this budget was a bet by the government that they can raise taxes by £40 billion without it showing up on the payslips of working people. But as the Office for Budget Responsibility pointed out today, the vast array of measures announced by the Chancellor will have a ripple effect across the whole economy that threatens to have a negative impact on household incomes. Our national correspondent, Tom Parmenter, has spent the day with people as they digested the budget measures. Here is his report.
This was the budget that claimed to back the workers. So in the People's Park in Grimsby, the verdict. For Brad, on a minimum wage, it's a 6.7% pay rise.
It's great for me because obviously someone on minimum wage, it means I'm earning more, can afford to do more. Obviously being my age, I'm 23, maybe actually looking to rent my own house and things like that. It's going to increase people's motivation to work. Even people who aren't working, maybe they're going to want to work more.
Karen teaches, so is somewhere in the middle, but still feels the strain.
I'm struggling. I'm really struggling. You know, as a family, we've talked about Christmas this year, what we're not going to do, rather as opposed to what we are going to do, because we're all struggling, you know. So the middle people, I think, get ignored a lot of the time.
Vanessa, like many grandparents, has given up work to help her daughter save on childcare costs. She doesn't buy the Chancellor's pitch of protecting the working people.
I am disappointed that they do seem to be targeting the working man. It's like putting up the minimum cost of the bus fares from £2 to £3. People that go to work have got to still get to work, and it's taking money out of their pocket to get there.
The government would say that rise unlocks investment to transport in places like Grimsby. But what really matters is the money people have now.
I'd say it's a mixed picture. The very lowest paid in society are better off. No doubt about it at all. £1,400 for someone on a minimum wage a year. That's a big deal. Those on lower incomes, mixed picture. Middle incomes, mixed picture. Probably more take than give. Those on higher incomes, I'm afraid you're going to have to dig deep into your pocket for this one.
There are middle-income strivers all over the country, like the Matthewmans in Essex. Busy parents with good jobs. Ahead of the budget, they mapped out where every penny of their income goes, and it's tight. They can't see anything from the Chancellor that alleviates their pain.
Nothing's changed. We are exactly the same as we were yesterday.
So, yeah, we'll just carry on as we are with our spreadsheet and tinkering away at it and, you know, getting the most out of our money that we can.
So like households across the nation, it's back to the spreadsheet. to work out where this budget leaves them and how they'll pay next month's bills. Tom Parmenter, Sky News.
Well, plenty to digest. So if you scan the QR code on your screen now, you can try to our budget calculator and find out what the measures announced by Rachel Reeves will mean for your finances.
Welcome to Valencia in Spain, where 3 days of national mourning have been declared as this region tries to come to terms with what hit it in the last 24 hours. And what hit it were extraordinary flash floods. A year's worth of rain, 0.5 metre, fell in just 8 hours. As we drove along here this evening, this road, one of the main roads leading south out of Valencia, has been turned literally into a river. It is covered in mud. There are articulated lorries piled up along the side of the road, and you can see behind us the cars look like a giant child has just picked them up and flung them over the barrier behind us. There are belongings strewn all over the road, people's cases, children's toys, as people literally fled for their lives. A third of the country has been affected by this flooding, but it is this area around Valencia that has been affected the worst. 95 people have died in this area. A state of emergency has been declared in large parts of the region as this year's worth of rain fell in 24 hours. All of those areas recorded rainfall of more than 460 millimetres in just that 24-hour period. Well, the highest recording was in Chiva, which is west of Valencia, which saw almost 0.5 metre of rain over a period of a few hours. Here is our Europe correspondent, Siobhan Robbins, with the story of the day.
In Spain's flood zone, a wire is lowered to a waiting rescuer, neck deep in water. He swims towards a woman sheltered under a doorway. Pulled into the current, they're lifted, finally to safety. This is the aftermath of flash floods that swept across southeast Spain. In Valencia, water described like a tsunami picking up cars. And those who sheltered inside got no more protection. You can hear the screams of care home residents as flood water, 1 metre high, gushes through. This is the worst flooding in Spain for almost 30 years. The force of the water enough to wipe out a bridge. In the daylight, this British builder surveying the damage.
We've literally had cars being washed down the riverbed, being swept under, and literally the water was overflowing this bridge here.
In Algemesí, half an hour outside Valencia, the damage is immense. The whole bar is destroyed, the freezers, the chairs, the tables, everything. I've just opened up now and there's nothing that can be salvaged, this woman cries. Stunned locals take in the destruction. Not one street has been left untouched here. By nightfall, the hours spent cleaning up does little to shift the mess. You can see this thick mud has been brought through the town by the strength of the water into people's houses, and there was nothing they could do to stop this, they say. They were powerless in the face of nature. As the death toll rises, so does the number of people deployed to help the survivors. More than 1,000 soldiers are operating with emergency services in scenes like these. The country's prime minister's offered his support. 3 days of mourning have been declared. Where the water has receded, the scale of the destruction is clear.
We just had time to grab our phones, not even our ID cards or anything. Everything on the ground floor is destroyed. I've never seen anything like it. At about 2 p.m., the water started coming in.
These people have no choice but to abandon their ruined homes. This is what they've left behind, the wreckage of lives devastated without warning. And it isn't over yet. The water's still rising and more storms are forecast. This devastation may just be the start.
And Siobhan joins me now from Algemesí, a town close to Valencia. And Siobhan, what strikes us arriving here this evening is the speed with which this happened, how people were taken unawares so very, very quickly.
That is exactly the story that we've been told by the people we've met here. If you have a look around, you can see that mud that I was talking about has coated this road. And basically what people told us was they had no warning whatsoever. They found out that the weather was going to be bad from the television. When they looked outside, they said water was already rushing down the streets. And basically the river overtopped and brought all of this mud into the town here. You can see that it's splashed up over the tops of some of those cars. That just shows you how bad the flood was. And actually this is the higher part of the town, so more in the centre. Some of the cars were on top of each other. People really just shocked by what's been going on here. And this is just a snapshot of trauma that's being felt by communities across southeastern Spain at the moment. We know that 70 people have been rescued by air today. More than 200 land rescues have taken place. Now, we know, according to the authorities in Valencia, that there aren't anyone else stuck on roofs, but people are still just putting together the pieces of their lives as they try to really take in the scale of the devastation here.
Siobhan, thanks very much. And as anyone who's travelled to this part of Spain knows, it is a really beautiful part of Spain. Mother Nature has gifted it with beautiful beaches and the hills behind me and gorges. And there's no reason to not understand why so many Spaniards choose to live here, why so many British tourists come to this part of the world. But in the last 24 hours, Mother Nature really has exacted a terrible price here. It came so very, very quickly, and it has been so terrible. And the real fear is that as the mud recedes, more bodies are likely to be found. Back to Anna now for the rest of the day's news.
Jane, amidst that devastation, thank you. Well, last night, Kamala Harris set out what was called her closing argument in her case to be president. Today, though, she had to make the case for the defence of her current boss, Joe Biden, who caused controversy with an apparent comment calling supporters of Donald Trump garbage. Here's our US correspondent, Martha Kellner.
It was supposed to be her night.
Good evening, America!
Kamala Harris delivering a closing argument. The message, choose me over Donald Trump. Cohesion over chaos.
On day one, if elected, Donald Trump would walk into that office with an enemies list. When elected, I will walk in with a to-do list.
Harris didn't directly address the controversy over Trump's Madison Square Garden rally, but lurking behind her in the White House, President Biden did. This on a video call.
And just the other day, a speaker at his rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
Harris has been trying to extend a hand to Trump's voters. Now she's cleaning up Biden's mess.
I strongly disagree with any criticism of people based on who they vote for. I believe that the work that I do is about representing all the people, whether they support me or not.
Harris will spend election night at Howard University, her alma mater in Washington, D.C. It's a historically black college. Students here divided on whether Biden's gaffe will impact voting. Do you think it's a shame he said what he said?
There's a layer of truth to it, I would say, but still, I mean, it's something that I wish my president wouldn't have said.
I don't know if it'll necessarily change the outcome, but I think it definitely does add into the way that politics has changed in the United States within the last 2 elections, where it's just this name calling and like just rhetoric that's hurtful.
You could say moves like that is the reason why Kamala's running and not Biden, because that's not a thought out move. That's not a chess move. There's validity in having emotion, but that doesn't mean that your emotion should dictate how you move.
So far this race, Kamala Harris hasn't lent too heavily into the historic nature of her candidacy. But spending election night here at Howard is a reminder of her roots and an attempt to keep this campaign on message. But her opponent, sensing an opportunity, is now trying to capitalise on Biden's remarks.
He called them garbage. You can't lead America if you don't love Americans. You just
The whole theme of Harris's campaign has been unity. But as this race enters its dying days, she can't escape the reality. Politics here is more divisive, the rhetoric more dismal than ever. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Washington.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we will take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview tonight, joined by the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail's Whitehall editor, Claire Ellicott. Welcome to both of you. Among the stories we will be discussing, digesting the budget, of course. This then the front of the Financial Times. Its headline, Reeves unveils £40 billion budget tax rise. Back with that and plenty more analysis after the break.
this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines, no guesses tonight, with the Daily Mirror's associate editor Kevin Maguire and the Daily Mail's Whitehall editor Claire Ellicott. Welcome and great to see both of you. So let's see what is on the front pages, the budget analysis from them. Not surprisingly, the Financial Times leading with the £40 billion worth of tax increases outlined in the budget by the Chancellor Rachel Reeves. Pointing out the risk she might be taking, the Metro harks back to the days of New Labour with their headline, "Things can only get better." The Guardian leads on the tax, spending and borrowing increases announced by the Chancellor. Spending on public services is the focus for the Mirror as part of Labour's plan to rebuild Britain. Meanwhile, the Eye calls the budget a £40 billion tax gamble. And the Times reports on the increase in public borrowing, declaring the budget a record tax burden. And it's called a tax bombshell by the Mail. While the Sun combines the Chancellor's budget with Halloween, its headline, "At least she kept it down at the pumpkins." The Telegraph does the same, not quite the same, calling the budget a nightmare on Downing Street and claiming it will damage living standards, as does the Express with the headline, "Halloween Horror Show." A reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you listen to our guests. So let's go to Kevin and to Claire. Goodness, that was a whopper, wasn't it? Tax, spend, borrowing, talking in the billions here. And how much of it, to put the question Beth Rigby did, Kevin, was in the manifesto?
Yeah, very little. She made a mark, didn't she? It's a significant budget. You can go back to Geoffrey Howe in 1979 with Thatcher. And she's gone off on a centre-left tilt here, and little of it was in the budget. I think Labour's total tax rises in the budget were about £9 billion on non-doms, VAT on private school fees, some on private equity, and so on. And this is what, 4.5 times as big. But you look at the FT, that front page. I think she'd be quite happy with that, because it just states a fact, 40 billion tax rise. But you like the way they've highlighted...
We haven't got to the Mail yet, but anyway...
I think it's where, in a way, you'll see the politics of papers, whether they're hostile or sympathetic. And the FT is quite sympathetic to Labour at the moment. So, look, she's aimed at fixing broken finances and public services. Business and wealthy bear bulk of the rises. She'll like that. And then the sharp surge in borrowing isn't good, but it's an extra 100 billion of capital spending. But when you read the story, though, they highlight a couple of things she won't like highlighting. One is that inflation will be up about 0.5% as a result. And the other is the FT point out that last year she told the Financial Times their taxes are at a 70-year high. I don't have plans to be a tax-raising Chancellor. Now, her argument, of course, is the 22 billion black holes. She wouldn't start here, but she has. She feels she has to do it. But there'll be that big argument again about Labour's manifesto. What mandate do you have? And the row will go on.
She feels she has to do it. Does that justify what some people will feel watching this, that they lied to us? And they lied for months and months and months, with every journalist asking the question about tax rises, about their plans, about borrowing, about fiscal rules. It's nothing to what we heard today.
Yeah, well, the Institute of Fiscal Studies pointed out both parties were essentially lying. And if the Conservatives were in power, they would have been putting up taxes and probably slashing spending on services, while she's put up taxes by more so she can improve public services, particularly the NHS. No, both parties played a game at the election, and Labour's strategy was to diffuse, and we'll get to the Mail on this, was to fuse what the Tories would say is Labour's tax bombshell, or Labour's tax bomb. 1992, it exploded all over Labour, and John Major got back into power. Labour this time round was determined the election wasn't going to be 1992 again. So they were economical with the facts, you could say, and misled people on the scale. Some of it you can justify on what they inherited, but others it's a political decision.
Well, you can justify it on need, because everybody wants the NHS to be functioning better. Should we jump ahead to your paper then, the Mail? Reeves's £40 billion tax bombshell for Britain's drivers. Record hike will take the tax burden to the highest level ever. The burden of it falling on businesses due that employers' national insurance, which will trickle down to employers, we heard from the OBR today, which, I mean, all of the quantity of this throws into shade the question about what does tax on working people mean, because all of this is kind of new to the party, isn't it?
Going back to your original question, did Labour tell the truth about what they were going to do during the election campaign? Did we expect this budget? No, we didn't. People were told that they were not going to put up taxes on working people. There is no way that national insurance contributions going up for businesses does not trickle down and affect wages and, in fact, investment that businesses do, affect like employment, affect how many people they hire, affect people's wages. This is something that will be paid for by Britain's businesses and therefore by workers, and it will have an ongoing impact. So, you know, Rachel Reeves told us she wasn't going to put up national insurance for working people. She didn't always clarify that, but she has put up national insurance, and it will be felt in the wages of Britain's workers, which is entirely what she said she wouldn't do. She also said this would be a budget for growth, and we've seen that growth forecasts have actually been downgraded as a result of this budget. And she also said that, and Keir Starmer said they would restore trust in politics. There is no way that Britain's workers are going to feel like they were told the truth during that election campaign when the effects of this filtered through.
Growth goes up initially in the first 2 years.
Because
and then
they pump in so much money.
Yeah, and then it goes down afterwards. And the Office for Budget Responsibility say about 3/4 of the national insurance increase will be passed on in lower future wage rises, not falling wages, but your rises in future may not be as big. But if you look at the figures on employment and unemployment, they're not massively impacted, actually, because there's a tight labour market, and employers aren't philanthropists. They don't employ people to think that it's great, let's give them some money and a job. They do it because they need them. And so there's not going to be this mass surge of unemployment as a result of it. But yes, there is an impact on wages. But you can't have good, decent public services and not spend on them. It's a myth. It's a myth that's been perpetrated for the last 14 years.
Look, we've had a situation where we kind of want taxes like they get in America, but public services like they have in Europe. And she has decided to take us towards a European model where, in fact, actually, proportionally, we do not have a very high tax burden. Should we continue with the newspaper?
Boris Johnson put up employers' national insurance as well, didn't he?
But
and it got cancelled, but he did. He put it up.
No, he did, but he put it for a specific reason, which is that we need to support our health service and we need to pay into social care.
It was, but hers is a specific.
But why not say that in your manifesto, we're going to put a penny up or 2 penny up on income tax for a specific reason?
Boris Johnson said in his manifesto he specifically wouldn't do it, and he did it. Now, she has done it for the NHS. That's why. If you want a decent health service, it's got to be paid for.
Yeah, not what you said during the election.
No way around. No, I mean, during the election, they should have been honest.
Yeah. People vote Labour knowing they will get higher taxes in the hope that they get better public services.
Exactly.
And to not spell that out.
Well, that is the political gamble, isn't it? But in all seriousness, we're looking at an election in America where there is toxicity and misinformation in campaigning. So trust in politics is incredibly serious. Yeah. And we're back to having to challenge that in this country when we've been through that.
But the problem in the political system now is no party is honest. I mean, that is the problem. Okay. And so if you are honest, you will lose. It's terrible, it's shaming. But that is it. We have a dishonest system at elections. And
I think you're right, but I think Keir Starmer did stand on a platform of restoring
trust. He may have meant it at the time.
He restored public trust and said there'd be no new taxes.
Yeah, well, it went out
the two together as a combination that is...
It went
out the window with the winter fuel allowance, didn't it?
I think you're probably right.
The only way there's going to be Britain's going to have the more sustained economic growth in the G7 Labour's mission is if the other 6 economies collapse now. I mean, look at those figures.
Quick look at the other headlines, of which there are many. The Guardian, return of tax and spend. And borrowing, we add to that as well. The Mirror, your paper, spending power. And this is the upside, of course, isn't it?
It is.
The fact that public services, people have felt have been rotten, and this might change it.
Yeah, and the Mirror is, the Mail's hostile to the Labour government. The Mirror is sympathetic. I think they're wrong on winter fuel. And that is it. There is an upside. Right? There's pain, but there's also gain. And if you value the NHS, and the Mirror's a big supporter of the NHS, readers depend on it. In the country, it's a national religion. You have to spend on it. Yes, you have to reform it do all those changes with technology, shift from treatment to prevention.
Analog to digital.
I was trying not to use that one. I mean,
there was another one,
hospitals into the community. You've got to do those three things. But they all cost money.
Yeah. Let's. Given the date of this is Thursday, October the 31st. Daily Express, Halloween horror show. Picture there of Rachel Reeves with her red box, and I know both of yours favourite, The Sun. I had to actually ask what it meant, but there we go. At least she kept it down at the pumpkins, because obviously they've got a Keep It Down campaign, which is about fuel duty, which is frozen again.
So this is our budget favourite. Every time the budget comes up, there's a big question over fuel duty, whether they're going to unfreeze the duties on it. And it's one of the Sun's big campaigns. And the Sun backed Labour this time, unexpectedly. They always back the winner. And their big campaign ask is always about fuel duty, making sure, ordinary drivers don't have to pay more at the pumps. And we didn't know whether Rachel Reeves would do it, but she's done it, and we have this front page.
But the Sun backed Labour when Labour was like backing a football team and 16-0 up. Right at the very end.
Reluctantly backed as well.
This is the front page they will like, because they will feel they've neutralised the Sun.
OK. There's an upside amid your £40 billion of taxes. There you go. Anyway, lots more analysis to come later with that. Also ahead, could a last-minute gaffe by Joe Biden hurt Kamala Harris's election chances next week? That and more after the break.
Are you ready to make your voices heard?
As America votes,
win, 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 win.
Get ready for an election night like no other.
Join our team stateside
as we get close to the action
and bring you the results as they arrive.
With full reaction and comprehensive analysis guiding you through the night.
In an election which could have huge consequences around the world.
America Votes, Election Night Live.
Get the full story first on Sky News.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion that's just come down. I think it was a monster just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States.
It's a border where they're not welcome, yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out and putting them into trucks and taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
We're seeing an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. This is much more like a normal town. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change. We're being crushed.
Free from wherever you get your news. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine. The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world. Sky News, the full story first.
Hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people. at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Or dry.
Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, Kevin Maguire and Claire Ellicott. Welcome back to both of you. Let's go to our next paper then, shall we, which is the devastation in floods in the Valencia area. Funneled, it seems, downriver and floodplain, but the stacking of cars, like matchboxes, is something that will really live with you after this flooding.
No, absolutely. It's they are the pictures that most shocked me, and it is just the force of that amount of water. And of course, anybody trapped in its way, you can't escape. There's been some terrible pictures of people being filmed, being washed down rivers, and you kind of fate unknown, but you can pretty much guess what it is. It's interesting. If it wasn't for the budget, it wouldn't be on page 14 of the Metro. I think the Guardian have got a little strip on it. I think all the other papers don't mention it at all. When you have
on the front,
the figure varies, but the Guardian has 95 dead, 64 here in the Metro that has very early deadlines. Yeah, it's given this as a European country not far from the UK, which so many people have visited, so they know
and live in. Brits anyway.
Yeah, and I acknowledge people are dying in Lebanon, Sudan, Gaza, other countries. And people can argue maybe they should be getting more coverage now than they do. But this has just happened, which is why it's news.
Yeah. And it's the quantity of rainfall brought about by climate change, again, that we're seeing, this absolute devastation and speed of fall. 1 year's worth of rain in just over 4 hours in one area. At least 95 dead. Clearly, recovery, if you look at the vehicles, there's so much work to be done and 3 days of mourning and more rain to come. So absolutely awful.
And I think what's extraordinary about this is that we don't expect these kind of floods in Europe. We don't generally have them. But in recent years, and that's what makes it very newsworthy, in recent years, we've had Europe being on fire during the summer, forest fires everywhere. We've had wildfires, we've had flooding like this, and you can see the kind of effects of a change in climate coming to Europe in a way in which, you just didn't see things like this 10 years ago.
It's also that story in the Times World section, but also on that page is Joe Biden's garbage gaffe, which puts Harris on the back foot, just as she was saying to Trump supporters, come join us, I'll work with everybody. Exactly the opposite, in fact, of what's outlined here.
No, Donnery Joe Biden comes out, and you can see if he was the candidate, it would be game, set and match, and Trump would be an absolute shoo-in for president. But he's said the only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters, that's Trump supporters. He meant, or we're told he meant, the supporters who were talking about Puerto Rico being an island of garbage, the comedian, but he's talked about the supporters. Now, Hillary Clinton, in her contest in 2020, described Trump supporters, was it a basket of deplorables, to describe them as deplorables? And that really damaged her. So you can see why Harris is thinking, oh, God, this is the last thing I needed. But then Trump is very free and easy with all these insults about
it doesn't stick the same, does it? I mean, Joe Biden's giving out candy for Halloween today. Halloween, of course, is very big business in America. Perhaps he sticks to that sort of gig for the moment. He's only got another 6 days or so, hasn't he?
Just smile, smile. Yeah.
Give out the sweets to the children.
Yeah, don't be a Halloween horror yourself.
Both of you, thank you both very much indeed. See you for the 11 right now. Let's take a look at the weather closer to home at least, and high pressure nearby will keep things quiet and mild into next week, but it will be rather cloudy with rain or drizzle in places. Expect a mostly dry and cloudy start to the day, but there will be some patchy light rain or drizzle around, mainly in the windy northwest. Parts of the clearer south will have some mist and fog, so pretty murky. They will lift through the morning to leave sunny spells for southern Britain. The northeast looks bright too, but most other places will be overcast, mainly dry again, wet for the Northern Isles and damp on some hills, especially in the northwest. Staying mild, but northern parts look windy with gales likely on Scottish coasts and hills. So for most people, if you're out trick or treating, it looks just about OK. Well, our press preview continues in Sky News at 11, looking in more detail at today's £1 billion tax-raising budget gamble by the Chancellor.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.